4.
Sorry, Mayor.
Sherry's
No,
gonna
you're
try and
fine.
make it complicated, so it's good. Stop her before she gets rolling.
That's right. I'm standing between you and
My son.
Valentine's Day.
My wife still hasn't even taken off. She's supposed to be landing at 9.
What are you worried
But
about?
the longer the babysitter is, then we're trying to help her make money.
I
Okay?
don't think they're making money. It's color nuts.
Supporting the local economy.
Exactly.
Nightclub.
Nice. Okay, we're back. Okay, welcome back to our work meeting. We are going to continue right where we left off.
So to be clear, you guys are choosing option A, so number 1 on option A is the number. Number 2 is how old they have to be and for them to be licensed and things like that. Number 3 is 1 litter of domesticated animals. So if you have 2 bitches, you're out of compliance with that. So my question is, are we saying that in our city, you're not allowed to breed dogs if you have more than 1 bitch?
I would, for my opinion, yes, because otherwise then it's a business.
But we allow daycares in our communities everywhere.
I have my opinions on those too.
Exactly, and so I
Those are worse.
I think that that's wrong. I think that there should be an allowance for someone to, as long as they can adhere to the other issues in this, that they're not becoming a nuisance to their neighbor, that there should be a pathway for them to go through to get a license to raise their puppies.
Could we then, what I would suggest, then could we look at it, I know we talked about that other light, the other.
For license or the.
Fancier.
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 Yeah, we're moving out of animal control into a business licensing
Right.
and kind of a zoning issue.
And that's what I'm saying, so that's what I think, I'm recommending we go this route for this, but I still want to have that avenue. I would like to pursue that avenue to have the fancier.
I'd be okay with that discussion, because that's different.
So that's where I'm at.
Okay, so then when will we have that? So let's get that on agenda, let's get that moving, cause this literally, and this is no offense to anybody, but this has taken 3 years. That's why my frustration with, well, we get to this point, it's like, well, it's gonna be the same. It's like, then we should have just done it 3 years ago and left it the same. So let's make sure it gets on the agenda and things get done so that the people who are being impacted by it or have been doing that and now they're in trouble for doing that because of whatever reason, let's figure out either they can or they cannot in our community.
And they're, the people you're talking about, they're one of many that are doing it
I think
legally.
Exactly,
So we
there's
should be
several
clear,
I've talked
there
to.
are codes that already exist that probably prohibit what they're doing. So any change we're making it's not like these are new codes or we haven't, this code, I think, was adopted in 2019. So it's been in place since 2019. The land use one, I'm not sure. That one will have to go, because it's in Title 10, is gonna have to go through the planning commission. So that's a little bit different process than just this. But this is an animal services, animal control code. When you start talking business, they may contradict, but one's going to have a license to do something and this one is just our standard process. So I wanna think, I know this was presented one time before I got here, we've talked about it ad nauseum. That's why we're trying to give you options. We just need to make a decision
and then move on.
because right now the existing code is what is there, it works okay. But my understanding, it was not what council liked, which is why we brought back a change, cause you do have a code, and it works.
It was just whatever was brought over when we
Right.
took
I don't know where
over.
it came from.
It just came over with the county. It's what came over when we changed and took it in for ourselves.
Would license and zoning trump this enforcement code?
Yeah, cause if they have a license, they're gonna be a business,
Okay.
they're different than this.
And I'm assuming there's fancier permit language out there that we could pull from other cities.
We actually have one already in
We have one
place.
existing, but the problem has been, according to the people who have reached out to me, and there's been more than one.
Yeah.
That when they talk to people here, they're like, we don't know what you're talking about, you're not gonna get a permit, we don't issue those, we've never issued those.
So a fancier is different, it's like 2 or 3 animals, not more than that. And the ones that I'm aware of are significantly more than that. It's not a fancier,
They'd
they're
be a
moving
breeder.
per the existing code into breeding, which is not allowed.
Anyway.
And that's all Title II.
Clear? Okay, sorry. Mayor, it's your deal, sorry.
Sorry.
Okay,
To go
I think I have
on,
enough
sorry.
direction on the number of animals.
We'll try to be brief on the other.
Restraining dogs. I saw this article and I just thought that would be applicable to Harriman, because I think we have received a lot of comment on leashes out of probably more than anything, as it relates to Title V. So most community require physical leashes to restrain dogs unless in a designated area like a dog park. The NACA recommends a physical leash, so do actually all of them recommends a physical leash. No leash issue, difficult to enforce, possible increase in dog bites. Understanding that even if they're on a leash, they could bite someone. And it protects those.
Dog bids. Who spell checked that?
Yeah, Matt, I thought I told you. Beep.
Dang, spell check.
To be fair, I was sick when I wrote this. And I sent it to Jackie late last night, so. But I take responsibility.
Should have sent it to me. I would have caught it.
I know, I did see you.
Well, you don't put bits in your dog's mouth?
But if you would've sent it to him, it wouldn't have had who let the dogs out in it either, so.
So the different options are,
Or
South
Mark.
Jordan, which, as you probably saw, this is a complete revision of Title V. Title V was, abnormally long, had a lot of things in there that didn't need to be in there. So we wanted to start over, have a good fresh, try to keep it simple, short, and to the point. So option one is South Jordan's requires leashes, when not confined, so like confined could be in your car, could be on your property, or off a person's, property, like their own individual property. Option two is the Park City option, and this is, I think, the only one I'm aware of in the state of Utah. I did read an article where it analyzed a couple different counties, but I wasn't sure if it was all counties. And they did point out in this article that Park City was unique. They allow for e-collars if within sight and sound of the owner and the owner is carrying a leash. And then option three is no leash, but they have to be under control, and we've defined control as being within sight or sound, e-collar or leash, or a variety of them. I wanted to present the options and let the council give me direction on what should be in the code.
All in favor of one?
Option,
Sorry, I think we've all had the discussion, I know.
Okay, leashes? Okay, cause we,
When did you have the discussion?
In the last council meeting.
Okay, I'm just curious.
I mean, I think from my point here, cause I know because we went and talked to Becky, and I love, I wish there was a way, I just could not
I
find
wish
a
option
way.
two was an option,
I just couldn't find a way
like
to
for
get there
inside city limits.
to where people like Becky, I think, are the exception where they will have, she has control. I just don't think, I think Becky's the exception.
I'm perfectly capable of judging the mood in the room, I already know where this is going.
Chief,
But-
can I ask you a question?
Are we still friends though, Sharon?
Do we, do, canine officers ever let their dogs off leash unless they're
Tasked to do something.
being tasked with something? Have them off leash, just walk around with them off leash? Do they feel like they're completely
They
under
do it at
control?
Fort Airman days.
Really?
Yeah, when we do the demos, those dogs are off leash.
Well, they're doing a demo, right? But just walking through the crowd and stuff like that,
They would be on a leash walking through the crowd.
on a leash,
Yeah,
right?
on
Yeah.
a short leash.
In open public spaces.
I guess I'm just trying to say that, when you're just walking around with a canine, which is
$100,000.
highly trained and well-invested super dog, it's under the control of a leash, not an e-collar, so.
I guess my point is,
They do work them under e-collars now. Yeah, they use both.
But no,
They have
no,
their leash with them around their waist,
when they're
and it's a
working.
3-foot leash, but they also run on e-collars for deployment purposes. And I would say all of that is related to the official duties of a law enforcement, animal.
Sure.
But yeah, they run them in a lot of different combinations. They have long lines that they run. If what you're asking, were they to go out and search for somebody, they would be on a 15-foot long line. unless it's an open field deployment and they wanna pursue somebody, they click them off the line and the dog would go and engage the person.
I guess I just, thank you, Chief. I guess I just fundamentally disagree with the comment was made about that laws are just kind of this umbrella that we hope people will follow. To me, if I'm gonna make a rule, I expect that it would be enforced. And I see all over the city, people not having their dogs on the leash. And so if that's the case, then our code enforcement needs to start enforcing the law. But it's like, well, we don't really want to because there was no one around and that dog can run around. Well, then I get an email from this guy saying, well, that dog, no one was around, but then all of a sudden somebody showed up and the dog went and bit somebody. So it's like, to me, it's like, I just don't believe in passing a rule when I know full well that people are just gonna break it and we're gonna give them a pass on it.
But we do that all the time.
Yeah, I
You know,
mean,
we have
if
speeding
that were
tickets, you were speeding and you got a ticket,
If that were
and
the
they just let you off.
If that were the
Or they don't
standard, that
catch
we
you.
have to
Right.
enforce every rule and every law to the teeth, what are we doing with any of them? There's not a single law or ordinance that's the case, not one.
We actually can't even make that requirement because state law allows for officer discretion. And
Well,
we can't
yeah.
administratively take that away from them.
I'm not
If they
suggesting
accept
that
the domestic
that you don't give officers discretion. I'm just saying that if I'm gonna make a rule, then I would expect it, but you pull them over if you saw them speeding, right?
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
They may choose
Well, it's
not
like,
to.
Sherry, it's like we have rules in our household and there are
Sure, just let me
consequences
go
if
by
you
what
break
you do.
those rules.
Just holds up the
Does my
sign.
son break rules and I don't know about it at the time? Sure.
Sure, but
When
then-
if there's a problem and I find out about it, there's consequences and I can point back to, we have rules about that and you understand that and there's a process to follow for when there's a problem. Right? That's my point. That's the issue. I'm not saying we just make rules hoping that people follow them. We make rules, laws, ordinances, one to try to prevent known problems, right? And put that structure in place to follow when someone chooses not to. We can't be a military state and make sure everyone complies with every dotted I and crossed T. There's no way any society has the resources to do that.
Right, well, I agree with that, I don't think that we have the resources to do that, then I look at it and then I try to decide, why do you have the rule then, right? And if you're saying you're looking at the evidence and you're thinking, no, we really need to have a leash law because it prevents A, B, and C. Now, it's interesting that they recommended the leash law on this and we're gonna go with the recommendations, but the limit, all of them said they didn't recommend a limit and we're gonna go against what the recommendation is on that, so that's interesting to me. But that's the way it goes. I just think that it's crazy to me that then we just encourage people to go ahead and keep breaking the rule. Instead of looking at it another way and saying, we could tell you that we're gonna say, yep, you can do that, but if you don't maintain control of your animal, cause I never am a proponent of no leashes. I think 99% of the people will keep their dog on a leash, and they should keep their dog on a leash, cause that's the only way they can control them. And that, to me, that was the change would be to say, just control your animal. I don't care how you do it, most people are gonna keep it on a leash. And I would absolutely advocate for that. But I just didn't want to make the rule that says you have to, when I could say, control your animal. The example that the gentleman gave us about his kid getting attacked, that dog is clearly out of control. That's breaking the rule, that's an infraction, that's a fine. Those are the kind of things that those dog owners would be in trouble for. That was been my only point. I understand exactly.
So this is kind of a philosophical discussion at this point, and I apologize for taking us down that road, but just to kind of put it in context, and this is just something that you and I are good friends and we're gonna agree to disagree on as a dog owner, right? So in that particular situation, I completely understand their family and that child's fear of dogs.
Sure.
And if they're out hiking on a trail and this loose dog approaches him, at what point is that infringing on his rights to feel safe?
Well, if he comes in his space, there has to be, but there's a definition in here.
Well,
about
who's there to enforce it? And they can come and complain to us, where's the starting point? Well, she claims that he was under control, he felt his space was violated and is traumatized and they're in therapy for it, et cetera, right?
And that dog could be 100 yards away.
Right.
But the dog
So-
could also be on the leash and terrify you.
Agreed.
So
I guess.
that's why I said, where's the starting point? Again, when there's an issue, where's the starting point for this process of balancing rights to begin?
Fundamentally, this is simply a tool for enforcement or liability in a tough situation.
Sure.
I do not see animal control running around to parks and say, oh, your dog was off the leash, you were playing fetch. I just
Although
don't
that
see that.
happens,
being-
I mean,
happens.
they does happen,
But-
if they're driving down the road and they see that incident, they will educate them. And if it's
And I
habitual,
think they could educate them, that's fine, that's been our policy all along as a law enforcement
Yeah.
agency, right, educate first, but, you know, if you have somebody that's a repeat offender, then they probably should understand that. I think that it's not, we don't have a leash because people with e-collars aren't controlling their dogs, that's not the issue, it's saying, as a policy for a city, we think you should have a leash to control your dog. If you choose not to follow that, liability's on you. You know, I personally don't think changing this ordinance is gonna have any impact on the behavior of any residents in the city at all, one way or the other.
I agree with that.
and that might be where some of the frustration comes from, is.
Right.
That is a frustration.
It is a
for me and
frustration too,
everybody.
I totally agree, but I do think though it will allow for the ability to, change behaviors of bad actors.
Maybe, but it just stays the same. But we're not
And-
changing anything, is my point. And so we'll continue to have bad actors. And my only sad part about it is we never do anything for the good actors. They don't get a benefit of it. By doing a great job training your dog, it does exactly what you tell it to do. You still have to tether it to a leash.
I'm a dang good driver and they never let me drive as fast as I wanna drive.
Well,
I was thinking that exact same thing.
Then you're not a dang good driver, because dang good drivers obey the
I
law.
don't, it's my wife.
But dang
But
good drivers
why
obey
is-
the law.
But you could, again, it's a philosophical thing. Why is the law there? Why is it that number? Why is it 55 on this road and not 70?
But that's
I'm-
easy, there's
And
stats for that.
my car is able to corner at that speed, right? Like, you can go all the way down
No,
and
yeah,
at some point you have to pick a starting point. What I kept coming back to with this one was, and when you first brought it up, I was all for trying to find some way to accommodate, right?
where I was too.
That checks all the legal boxes and liability and balancing other people's rights. And where I've come to is there's no real way to check all of those boxes. And in the end, why would we be changing it? What's the problem that we're trying to solve? And to me, we haven't checked the boxes that say we can solve that problem for this very minuscule number of people, right? 60,000 people. How many have dogs that are that well trained to be on an e-collar? Are we curtailing a law for a handful of people versus 60,000? At some point, we have to pick a starting point that works for most people.
no, and I was never a big e-collar fan of it. My whole premise was just simply maintain control of your animal. And so we can debate this philosophically all day long, but that was my issue. And again, I guess the concern to me also is that leashes are a false sense of security. Don't think that just you can turn your back now all of a sudden because, oh, that dog's on the leash, I can do anything around it, because it doesn't mean you're not gonna get bit. It doesn't mean you're not gonna get hurt. And it certainly doesn't mean if you've been traumatized by an animal, just because it's on a leash and it comes up to you, doesn't mean it's not gonna elicit fear in you. So I guess that was.
At least that child knows that it's on a leash, and if he stays out of the reach of the leash, he has some sense of safety, right?
Perhaps. But that's my only concern is that people get bit by dogs on leashes all the time. And so it's just a false sense of security to me. Anyway, so we're good with the way it reads, right?
Which one do you think?
Option B, right?
Option one up there,
No,
whatever
no,
option
no.
one is up there.
Option 1 is the owner of the dog shall restrain said dog by a leash or lead not to exceed 6 feet in length. And the definition of leash in the definition should probably add the 6 feet in that, by the way. Other physical enclosures or within the real property limits of the owner, if the owner is physically present with the dog, such the animal is prevented from leaving the owner or responsible person's property or supervision. A violation is a Class B misdemeanor.
We'll talk about violations in a second.
Okay, perfect.
One clarity point, I know that plenty of people, me, I go running all the time, so, when I take my dog out, a retractable leash, right? It goes out 12 to 15 feet.
Can't do that.
I know, so that's where that leash length might be. I mean, cause if it's, I mean, they aren't gonna, I wouldn't assume the officer's gonna pull somebody over on a retractable leash and be like, that was at 7.5 feet, you're getting a citation.
Yeah, but if it's to restrain, 15 feet's a pretty long distance.
No, I realize that, but if, that's the tough
So
thing.
again, why, so to me, it's the same sort of thing as starting point when there's a problem, right? So, and I'll do the A. If it says 6 feet, right, and you respond to an issue, somebody was bit and they were on a leash, was it too long and they didn't have proper control of their dog? Like, it's just, tell me if I'm wrong, but to me, something like that's giving a starting point, or does the
I mean,
length
the
matter at
retractable
all?
leash poses a problem because we're not going to be able to know where that
What-
leash
how long
was
it
when
was
that
at the
event took
time.
place. Certainly if the dog bites you, it won't.
Be able to say, I was over here, they were over there, they were 12 feet or 15 feet, cause they had this long leash, it wasn't 6 or 8 feet, which is my height.
That's where I'm going, right? So the
But if you're,
retractable
somebody
thing,
that
if there's a
can say
bite, it doesn't matter what size leash
Leash
they're
they
on,
had,
the
yeah.
owner's still responsible for that
Sure.
bite.
And
But
that's
at
where you're
least
gonna
you
get
can say
into,
they were out
if there's a bite, it doesn't matter.
And
If
why
the
don't
dog
we
is
have a
jumping on the
leash
person,
period?
knocks them
That's
over or something,
confused.
then, you know, they still haven't
Doesn't matter.
maintained control of that dog
the maintaining
regardless of the
control.
length of the leash. But it certainly poses it makes it a little bit more difficult to get to the bottom of it, but versus that
So-
it just charged me and scared me.
Do we complicate the code by adding something in there like that? Cause we're gonna see plenty of people running down Main Street and 134th every day.
Walking their dog.
Walking their dog or even having
2
the,
hours.
even the little Yorkies on a 15-foot leash or 10-15 feet, like,
I don't know, but
Yeah.
I've had dogs for 30 years, I've never measured a leash, I've never looked at what the
There's a-
city I live in, the ordinance is.
on
And
leash.
again, it's, pick a number, I don't care, it's a starting point, what's reasonable, right? What makes sense? It's just a starting point.
But so we put,
There doesn't just need to say,
it's a leash
On a
and
leash.
maintain control, right?
Have we
wouldn't
ever
have-
issued a citation for the length of a leash?
Not that I'm aware
but
of.
so maybe it
seen
just
what the
needs to
number
say on the
is.
leash, you shouldn't have a measurement on there, because if it bites somebody, then you're already in trouble
Separate
anyway.
offense.
It's a
They're
separate offense.
separate offense.
So it
Don't
doesn't
show
even
information
matter,
about it.
your dog's on a leash.
I'm, as a dog owner, I'm of opinion that the length of the leash does matter, and that 6 feet makes a lot of sense to me, because that's how far I can reach. Right, there's a problem, right? I yank back on this one and I can grab him here. If it's longer than that, if it's longer than that, I can't do that, right? If it's 10 or 15 feet and I'm at a park and all of a sudden there's another dog that comes and that retractable thing goes out or whatever, and they're in this radius, it takes longer to get them under control, sort of thing, so.
No,
I mean, again, when you look at standards that others have had, they're usually not just purely arbitrary, right? If you think through, there is some rationale to why it's there. I'm gonna use one of Steve's line, at this point, pick something, I don't care, this is
We're getting in the weeds.
this is into the chicken stuff for me, where how many chickens can you have in this size and that size and what style, whatever, like, pick. I'm not joking, go back to those meetings, but some of these things are just common sense, that they're standards for a reason, there's liability, things with the insurance, like I've said this before with these conversations, for me, I'm good with what we have, it's not broken, I'm not looking to fix it, unless our people tell us there's a reason to try to fix it.
So option
If
A.
our enforcement and legal is telling us these are our recommendations, the best option, I'm good.
So option A.
So no,
I would just remove the length. That's where I'm at. I know.
Option A, keep the
6
length.
feet.
Same. Option A, keep the length.
Alright, moving forward, females in heat.
Okay, can I get a win on this?
there was
Come on,
a- there was a-
females in heat, give me a break. What about the male dogs? Are they gonna have to be locked up because there's a female in heat around this?
Now you're calling them females.
Well, exactly.
How do you know?
Now I'm
how they
confused.
identify?
What we're talking about.
Can't just assign it to them.
Sorry.
You didn't take the approach, huh? You didn't take the advantage.
I could not help myself to it.
wow.
There was a request to remove this, so there are actually, I couldn't find any national standards in none of those other associations. Most communities do require confinement of females
That is
and heat.
sexist.
Why? I don't know
The
why.
male or female?
But I think it's cause the boy dogs are crazy. So any,
So it's boy dogs that have the problem, if they're going crazy, then the
Sounds
boy
like
dogs should be confined.
it is,
Mix them all.
and we should actually lock up all
Like
teenagers.
the girl dogs are egging them on, you know.
Oh, yeah,
These
see,
boys.
sexist.
What's happening?
Any,
Not saying anything.
But listen to the language, such dog or cat, or a cat, mind you,
Jeez.
has to be constantly confined in a building so as to prevent it from attracting scent or coming into contact with other dogs or cats. That means you couldn't even take your dog on a walk. You can't go out in the yard with your dog the whole time she's in heat. Give me a break. This isn't just out and about. This is on your own personal property. You can't let your dog outside if she's in heat. That's crazy. In my opinion.
I'm just gonna
How do
look
we
at
get
it.
Sherry Wynn here? How do we get Sherry Wynn?
And why doesn't a male dog have to be confined?
On this one, I really
Male
don't.
and female
I
combined.
can create I can try to come up with some solutions to be, again, we used a
If your
Gender
boy's feeling
neutral.
randy, you need to look him up, you know?
I'm looking at, we just said they have to be under these people's control, right?
Yeah.
So why do we care about this?
I didn't care
I don't care
I
about
really
that.
don't.
Well, dog, it's
So
your
take it out
dog's.
then? You're okay taking
Yeah,
this
okay.
out? Okay, there's your
I'm
win.
not, this is the first city I've seen
Well,
like
well,
that. and
my first thought is you gotta be kidding me, wouldn't this fall under breeding and control, like why is this something
Okay.
separate?
I don't wanna have anything to do with
Sherry's win,
that
okay.
conversation.
Alright, penalties. So again, we used a base template and the penalties came from the base template. So I think things that you need to think about are what penalties should be for what. Should they be different for the different type of violation? For example, if a dog is at large, what should be the violation for a dog at large? Should it start as an infraction? Should we increase it for any subsequent issue? And then what should those increases be? So the way that South Jordan has it is they have an infraction first, and then for like a dog at large or something like that. And then the next one, if that happens again within 5 years, it's Class B misdemeanor, which is
In 5 years?
Yeah.
5 years, so
5
that
years.
Holy
the
smokes.
time is long
That's what ours
and the
says.
increase is long.
Big. That's,
Big.
Class B's a
Class
big
B
deal.
misdemeanors are
Tell
big.
us,
Like, that's a
can you
DUI.
just
Yeah,
give
that's what I
us
was gonna
your
say.
suggestions?
Yeah, we can,
B's a lot.
Yeah, it's a big jump, right?
It's
Just
a
after
big
one
jump.
time.
Really, you guys are the ones that are
DUI
dealing with
is
this,
letting
you're
your
the
dog
ones
out of the
bringing
yard.
this to us, tell us what
say
you'd like to
fighting
see.
might
Twice
be
within
just
5 years.
Yeah, the offense type, obviously.
Having a
right?
dog off a leash
Yeah.
would be a lot.
So right now, I've been adjusting everything down, what our code is, so typically I don't want somebody to have a criminal history for a dog issue, so they get what's called a plea in abeyance. But even if they do, I've adjusted it down from say a class B to a class C, and they get a plea in abeyance, cause I'm just trying to get compliance, so they quit letting their dog run free in the neighborhoods, whatever. The ones I don't have much mercy on are if their dog attacks somebody.
Yeah,
I leave that as a class B.
I agree.
Depending on the facts, they may get a plea in abeyance, but that's worthy of a class B where.
Are they repeat offenders a lot of the time? Same household, same dogs?
We've only had a couple, I think.
One person comes to mind and he had 4 cases.
Time frame?
So-
But usually,
In 1 year?
yeah, pretty quick.
So is this
Most
saying
people
these are
learn when they
these are
get-
maximum
when they come
penalties
into-
and you have discretion?
No, it gets set in our ordinance, but I always have discretion to
Well-
drop things down.
Well, that's what I mean, so this is like the maximum that can be in the ordinance, but
Yeah,
then-
we can only charge them as if he is the highest.
Okay, so if there's a big problem,
So understand.
then you have that stick to use if you need to, right? And you get compliance, and that's the fear, if I don't. So the way I look at it is, when I used to run a family entertainment center, our litmus test when a kid got in trouble was when we called the parents, was the kid worried or not? Right?
Cause that's how,
So you have a
that's how
problem,
thick Dad's belt was.
here, you have a problem, here's the maximum it can
Grab
be,
a shoe.
boom, gosh, I'll never do that again, I'm so sorry, great. Or, you can't do anything to me, alright, here we go. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Can you maybe come back to us with, because you're dealing with these all the time, I also don't want it to be where you have to come in and do plain advances all the time either. I just want it to be easier for you to say, here's the first infraction, here's the second infraction. I think 5 years is crazy to me, I think maybe 1 year, but 5 years, it's like at the class B misdemeanor, that seems like pretty crazy, cause.
Cause in
Well,
5
if you
years,
have-
I've left my front door open twice.
Exactly, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, your dog, or some dogs get pretty smart about how to get out, you know, and as hard as you work, you're like, I'm back, and they're responsible, they're calling, do you have my dog, I'm sorry, you know what I mean, something like that, it just seems like, I don't know.
What it sounds like is maybe there's some room here to shorten the time frame. Maybe look at escalating if you're having a problem. I think, the other question up there is for different types of violations, so we talk a lot about running at large. What are the other, is it barking or,
Nuisance.
what are some of these other ones?
Not vaccinating your animals,
Licensing.
Unlicensed, unvaccinated.
So my suggestion is you probably do have, those are biting a child,
Yeah.
forgetting to, well, even not having your dog on a leash, those are much different kind of
Agreed.
things.
If you
wouldn't-
recall in 2019, when we went through this, we did have a blanket Class B for the entire chapter. And there was the story of someone who couldn't get into nursing school because she had a dog off the leash ticket that was a Class B misdemeanor on
Yeah.
her criminal history. And that's kind of what precipitated the conversation in 2019 of we really should have, just like we do on the criminal code for every other criminal offense in the state of Utah, we have varying levels depending on the severity. The misdemeanor offenses that we left at the time were animal attacks, keeping a dangerous animal, like if you import a crocodile or something, that's a Class B misdemeanor. But allowing your dog to run off leash or not being licensed, we reduced those to infractions at the time for that reason, so.
So, I don't think we're looking for you to say, we want this one to be a B, we want this. You're okay if when we come back to the regular
Schedule.
meeting, if we show, here's what we're doing and
Yeah.
after we
Tell us
talk
what
with
you wanna
everybody,
do and I'll
here's what
say
makes
yes.
sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
Last
With
one.
escalators or something, yeah.
and we kind of talked about this throughout. So breeding, kennels, fancier permits, that's all in Title V.
There's some in Title only
Title
the
10.
fanciers are in 10. It's weird. It's super strange. Our code is really
Yeah. So, as mentioned, I think we need to make some changes to Title 10. Make sure they mirror the changes that we have proposed in Title 5 and that they cross-reference each other. So I've listed the current code. Kennels are only allowed as a conditional use in 2 zones. Fanciers are allowed as a permitted use in all residential zones except the RM zone. Breeders need to follow a 5-page permit requirement in Title V. So we're trying to again, shorten, reduce, and make it more simple. So that way people can actually go to the code and read it and understand it.
The only reason why we might want to have information in Title 10, we don't have to, is if we wanna be selective in what zone types we wanna allow the use.
Yeah.
If we're willing to let the use be anywhere in the city, we don't need to do a zoning element.
You're talking for fanciers and breeders?
Yeah, or
So,
kennels, or whatever
interestingly,
we wanna do, right?
Kennels and fanciers show up in our code. Breeders don't show up
Right,
anywhere, but we
Right.
talk about breeders.
right.
That's what I say, our code is, what did you say? We just brought it over. It's Dr.
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein's monster, right?
Yeah.
We've just thrown all this stuff together.
I think the thing to keep in your mind as we look at making changes to Title 10 is also the home occupation.
Yes.
Because doing things in a residential home do increase the impact of a typical residential home that's more commercial,
Yeah.
has
I mean,
that
it's a
commercial
business, right,
element.
Yeah.
I agree.
And that's okay, because we do allow for a lot of things to happen in a home, such as daycares and piano lessons and swim schools, that sort of thing.
We have a ton of home-based businesses in our community.
We do. So that's gonna be where, I think when we make changes to Title 10, that we'll also need to look at the home occupation ordinance.
Yeah.
To allow for, even though they might be prohibited in the zoning code, or I don't know how we reference it. Here, but-
Permitted, conditional, or not allowed, right?
Yeah.
There are some sections, yeah.
So that last.
So, So I'm guessing that you want us to make changes to Title 10 and bring that back. We'll go through the process, and then we'll continue to move Title 5 forward. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, but I have a few more questions. Do you have more slides?
Let's see. Yeah.
No, no is the answer.
Look, Daddy, Todd is stupid.
That's true. I'm glad that you didn't put my face on that.
He's all hopped up on cold too.
I have a few things. Okay.
It's great.
Under definitions under animal restraint, it says, animal under restraint, or if in the case of a dog, the dog is within the real property limits of the owner and the owner is physically present with the dog. So does the owner have to be physically present with the dog all the time if it's out on the real property? That's how it reads.
Where is it? Sorry.
It's under definitions, animal under restraint.
Okay.
The very last, or if in the case of a dog, it seems like we shouldn't, I think if your dog's out in your yard and in a secured yard, you shouldn't have to be out there with your dog. Anybody opposed to that?
Yeah, I would say if it's
a secured.
confined.
Yeah, it's animals under control, I just don't think you should have, because that listed above there, I just don't think you should have to.
If they're like half the people in my neighborhood, they're let their dog out in their front yard and there's no fence, there's no nothing there,
Right.
right? Then that's,
The ones I get.
and that's a problem.
Yipped at when I'm walking in the morning.
Yeah.
And then wild animals, I just had a weird question, because when I grew up with people that had raccoons, and I think that there are people around that have pet raccoons. It's listed as
Bad
prohibited.
idea.
Bad or good, I just wondered if there's.
So my understanding on raccoons
Okay.
is that if we end up trapping them or come into possession of them, they have to be destroyed. It's mandatory.
Okay,
Babies.
Even if they're baby raccoons, it doesn't
Okay.
matter. So if they get trapped, come in, you can't have them. I would imagine, and maybe VA, you know, that I've seen people with raccoons. Maybe they have a permit for them. They're
so they maybe have to go through the state for a wild animal permit
I
if they have
would-
a raccoon?
best, I would think that. I do know that we destroy them whenever they're turned in because the state requires us to.
I don't.
Is that right?
I'm not aware of a permit, that I'm aware of. I do know that they're hard now. You can't have them.
It's mandatory.
Okay, cool.
Mandatory
You
destruction.
can apply to the Utah Department of Agriculture for a permit to hold raccoons or coyotes in captivity. Coyotes.
But we prohibit them,
I grew up
so
in
you
Nevada,
wouldn't
so
be able to do
coyotes.
that here.
What?
Unlawful acts crossing onto the property of another unless the owner has the permission of the affected property owners. I understand why that's listed there. Good luck on enforcement of that.
When they turn it loose,
Sorry. Injury to animals by motorists, is that a state
but we could
requirement?
breed
'Cause
them and just
that
keep
all
the
seems
money.
crazy. If you hit an animal, you have to call the police immediately, wait for the police to come, stay at the scene. You may render aid or you may not. Is that a state law? I mean, I just am curious about that.
I think it is if you're involved in an accident. And essentially, they're classifying that as an accident where you at least have to make notification.
Cause you would leave the scene,
I mean, you could pull off the road or pull into the 7-Eleven or whatever. You don't have to sit right there in the middle of the freeway, but you have to make notification.
Okay, I was just curious, it's not just a state rule that we're that. And then there was also seems redundant in 5-1-8, option C, it says license. Nothing in this section exempts any animal from the license requirement of this chapter. Every section above that requires them to have a license, so that's pretty redundant. Sorry. There was the tag issue, I didn't see it, so we didn't talk about that. I do not believe, the caller thing came away, but I don't believe that we should require someone to have their tags on their animals at all times, because that requires them to be collared at all times. And I have big issues with animals being required to have a collar when they're on my property. There's dangers that are associated with that. And so I think with technology nowadays, so many animals are chip tagged, and the person should have to produce it. Oh, I gotta see their tags. I just don't think that we should require them to have to be attached to them at all times.
I don't even have to have my ID at the airport anymore. It's all digital.
I don't disagree with you when they're in your yard or whatever. I think the only stance from the animal services side is if it does escape and it doesn't have it, it makes it more difficult, especially if you haven't chipped it. But certainly if it's in your backyard and you take the collar off or whatever, it runs
You
around.
make a chipped or tag if it's
I
not
don't know
confined.
that we have
Chipped or tag.
if it's not
If
confined,
not on,
enforcing.
on owner's property.
It's
Or
option
something.
one or option two would just be they have to have a license when they're on, essentially when they're not on your property. Well, this is public
No.
property.
No, this is under the rabies section.
Oh, I'm looking at,
5-1.
we have 5.1-13 is wearing a tag.
Yeah.
Every owner or licensed shall does, license.
So are you trying to say though, not tagged or licensed, but, or tagged or chipped? Not confined, if it's not confined in your yard.
This is probably only coming up if we catch a dog out. Nobody's going to go up to anybody's yard and say, I don't see a collar on that dog.
Yeah, we would not take any enforcement action under our current
Or even if you're
ordinance if
walking
we
in the
walked up to
park.
your house and,
Yeah.
and engaged you that your dog doesn't have a tag on and it's in your living room. Certainly, we wouldn't be worried about that, but, mostly because we're not going to encounter them unless we're there on some other call.
But the toughest thing is when you encounter them, they've escaped or got out of the house, and if they don't have their tags or collars on, they're without them anyways, so it's tough, yeah.
Anyway, so I don't know how you guys feel about that, I just,
Certainly preferred that they have them if they escape or run out the front door or jump the fence.
But
or
I agree, like on Sherry's property or any ag property, there's a lot of hazards, but residential property, there's less hazards, I would assume.
I've buried dogs getting hung up with
Oh, yeah.
collars, so. I just don't know that, I think that that's a good requirement. If you're taking them for a walk off your property and they're on their leash, and you're gonna have to have their collar on, their
Which
tags on.
section are you looking at?
That was under the rabies section, it's section C of the 5-1-18. And then,
So we have that in a couple spots then, we probably.
Yeah.
Could, we have it under, we have wearing a tag and then we have it under babies, so maybe we can.
And
Seems
then-
like we could combine that, so.
and then the other, under G of the rabies, vaccinated, bitten, or exposed animals. So this doesn't make any sense to me. If the bitten or exposed animal has been vaccinated, the animal should be revaccinated within 24 hours and quarantined for a period of 30 days following revaccination. So apparently vaccinations have to be revaccinated, so I don't know why you get vaccinated anyway, but anyway. But then number 2 says if the
COVID
animal,
Sorry.
if the animal is not revaccinated within 24 hours, the animal shall be isolated and quarantined under veterinary supervision for 6 months. So if your animal gets bit Saturday night and you don't get to the vet until Monday morning, your animal has to be under quarantine, which is very severe, with the veterinary supervision for 6 months.
And I saw that too. I would have to research that to confirm that that's the timeline on that.
Okay, and so those things, I was like, well, that seems a little crazy to me. So unless that's like the state code requires this or something, I
Sure.
think that I think we should look at that. Those are my other issues.
Okay.
That's it? Oh, one other thing, somebody questioned, sorry, about the 4 months on the rabies versus 6-month-old. Their vet tells them that they shouldn't have their dogs vaccinated until they're 6 months. And this just 4 months, and they were questioning if we knew exactly what the recommendation was on that, and I didn't know.
Yeah, I don't know the
So if
answer,
you,
but we
if
can
somebody
look at that.
could double check on that, and make sure that we're just,
Put the
whatever's
most appropriate
recommended.
one in there, yeah. I think it's just when. I don't think there is a month recommendation.
I didn't know, their vet just said 6 months, so I was just
I
curious.
think,
if-
but it just has to be done in 2 parts, so there's a time frame that has to exist in
In
there, and
between.
that's part of what it is, yeah.
Anyway, just if you could double check on that. That-
Maybe that's
all.
like most vaccines, is they're recommended at that, but there's not a.
Yeah, just so we were just kind of in step with what the veterinary recommendation would be on how old the animal should have to be. And then, let me just check on my notes, sorry. How come there's no birds or chickens in any of this? How come-
Jared,
how
how come you
come-
took chickens out of it?
How come a neighbor could have a whole coop full of pigeons that get released once a day and crap all over my deck? There's no regulation on that.
They're homing pigeons.
Yeah, home to my deck to poop all over.
That's under the chicken ordinance.
Animals and fowls in Title 10, yeah.
So, okay.
It's a different section.
To answer your question, I don't know the answer to that.
I promise you, there's something for it.
I was just
Never
curious, I
wanna
was
talk
like,
about it again.
Probably some slacking attorney thing, you know.
Sherry, all joking aside, I appreciate your passion on it. I really do. I mean, it's good that,
it's
this is not my area, and I appreciate your passion and your desire to make this title like truly, I appreciate your work on it, that you've driven this, so.
And I appreciate our ability to talk and have conversations when
Well, I
there is a
still
difference
like
of
the mayor
agreement,
anymore,
right?
so.
That goes for,
That means you
and I
liked
say
it
that
one time.
for everybody.
Yeah, that's a big jump.
That's right.
Okay, thank you everybody for all your work on that. We good? Everybody got direction they need? Yep. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Do a quick legislative update, Todd,
Oh, sorry.
2.5.
Alright,
No, he said the last one would be quick.
Hey,
Do you see the last slide? Don't trust me.
yeah.
That's right.
So we talked about, when we did this last year, as far as giving a very short legislative update. Like a couple of bills that we think would be important to you. There are so many bills out there, so it's hard to narrow them down.
This is people creating laws that have no effect or enforcement.
Yeah.
Or
So,
have an effect that can't be
But
avoided.
benefit them financially.
That's right.
if you haven't heard, HB 13, that's the Infrastructure Financing District. That one seems to be going through. That one has had a lot of input from the league and the stakeholders, and it seems like they got to a point. Really, the holdup was, when should these debts be paid off? The initial thought was that the certificate of occupancy, Saratoga Springs wanted it at when you record the plat. And they're kind of ended up in between, so that was the only discussion there.
Is it still at final inspection
Yeah.
in the bill?
That the debts for,
HB 289, this is the property rights ombudsman bill from Berkland. This allows for a developer to potentially get consequential damages if there's a dispute with a property owner and you get an advisory opinion from the property rights ombudsman. And let's say that opinion was in favor of the developer and the city said, well, we don't really care what the ombudsman says. And then they have to take it to court, and the court has the same opinion as the ombudsman. This bill, the current language in code says that a court can award attorney's fees and a $250 penalty if there is knowingly, the 250 part, knowing and intentional violation of law. The developers wanted to add consequential damages into that and to make them all mandatory. So the developers are saying, we have to carry such huge costs that the $250 a day doesn't touch even come close to just the interest we paid on it. So that one's getting to a point where it's not mandatory, all of them. Right now, I think the mandatory applies to attorney fees. And then it's mandatory if there's a bad actor city that consequential damages apply. I just heard today that there's talk of it's possible that those might turn into options instead of shall, it can be may. So that would be a pretty significant move if that's the case.
Don, I've found, it seems like when a city is appropriately administrating their land use regulations, I have found that the ombudsman is typically in line with the city's position. I'm sure that there are times when there is a disparate, interpretation, but
Yeah.
usually if we're behaving ourselves, the ombudsman's gonna back us up. Yeah.
it's still a committee.
Sometimes it's just an interpretation of the law, and it's one of those, a developer saying one thing, the city saying the other thing, and we think that we're right. So, and the ombudsman might say, well, we agree with the developer, so it can be a very delicate issue. Sometimes it's just, we think the city's violating the law. In fact, the last ombudsman opinion was, Ivory alleged that Wasatch, County was violating the law in the way that they administered their ordinances. The ombudsman came back in favor of Wasatch, but it was a dispute of what the law says.
In that case, then Ivory should pay the city's attorney fees,
Yeah,
And
right.
we said it should go the other way too.
right?
So the attorney's fees would go both ways. The consequential damages, that's where it wouldn't go both ways. What are the city's damages for, we're not paying interest on anything. We said no to whatever the developer's trying to do. And that's where the developers are like, we need this because we're out, so much.
That's insane. That's an inherent risk in the business they're engaged in.
Yes, that one has, so it's gone through committee, it went through the House floor, the floor passed it, 40 plus votes to 20 no votes. It's now with the Senate, and within the Senate, it's in a committee. It was supposed to be heard today, but they pushed it to next week.
That's insane.
I have personally been fighting a lot on that one. Testified on behalf of not just Harriman City, but I'm the president of the Utah Municipal Attorneys Association. So on behalf of UMAA, against the bill. HB 306, this is the residential housing amendments. This one hasn't really moved, but wanted you to be aware that we're seeing a lot more bills like this, where the bill would say that cities cannot deny a building permit if the lot size is X size or small. So they're trying to dictate that land use issue from the legislature. In other words, if a lot is 0.18 acres, that we can't deny a building permit on that. Well, Harriman, it's not as much a problem as maybe, let's say, Bluffdale, where they only allow 1 acre lots on half of their city. So, but this is the type of legislation that it's a one size fits all, as the league always says. So that one hasn't moved, but again, I wanted you to be aware that that's what a lot of them are pushing. On a good note, SB 47, this is the local government business license amendments. This goes to the lemonade law, and we have talked about this in the city, where we are getting children out at city events, basically standing in front of a vendor who paid to be there, selling their sodas at a fraction of the cost of what the vendor's there for, and we're getting complaints from the vendor saying, we're paying a lot of money to be here, and then we're having these little kids make a killing and taking away all the business away from us. So a portion of this bill was being amended. I reached out to Senator Baldery, who was sponsoring the bill, and I worked with Libertas on adding language that that stated that it was clear that we can dictate what happens at city events. We're going to talk an interim on what can we now do on parks. And Libertas was really concerned on park strips. Because if a kid's out in front of their home and they're in the park strip, we don't want to dissuade that. But on the city side, well, what if they're in the clear sight triangle and someone's trying to back out, or maybe on the sidewalk and people are now going around? So it was a much bigger discussion. So that's why we're leaving that part for interim. SB 91, this has had a lot of discussion. Municipal officer compensation amendments. So this would require a public hearing anytime an elected or appointed officer changes compensation. What does that mean? Does that mean you get a gift card and you have to have a public hearing every time you have a gift card? This stems from a city that a mayor went out and they hired a new city manager, and a new mayor got appointed, and they changed I think the city manager's salary, didn't have a public hearing. It did go through the budget process, but it wasn't maybe advertised that the city manager was getting a raise or something like that. So the legislature wants more transparency, which I think is a good thing. But how do you apply that to every small detail? Does that include COLA increases and just our standard increases that we do each year? And what about if we get a gift, and how do we treat bonuses? And do we need to just put up our schedule of what pay range is? So there's a lot of discussions on this. This is one that we'll be negotiating continually.
That's not a committee today.
It came out with some amendments.
Yep.
It's not unworkable. I don't think, we spend a lot of money as a state to do this transparency website, which this is just doing the same thing, so.
Yeah.
They did, I think, clarify that it can happen on the same night you're doing your budget. It's not thing, and they did go through and talk about specific, they used to just have to, they deleted salary and put compensation in, which was not really defined, and now they're trying to define it. My only knock is I don't think the league had any of the finance or budget people do it. They had the attorneys negotiate this, and they're not the ones who have to put all this stuff together. So you're reading through it, it's like, that's gonna be just kind of a little bit of a pain, but I will take that up with Cam, that he really needs to think about who he's asking to negotiate these things when they're doing it. It can't just be the attorneys.
It's always bad, always. Last one, SB 185, is residential building amendments by Vickers. This would allow for third-party inspections to occur. We saw a bill similar to this last year where if a city is not maybe doing the inspection quick enough, that it might give a developer an option of hiring a third-party building inspector. I think the worry is that if the developer picks the inspector might want to have business continually come back to them. And
They used
it's
to do
not
that
that
with-
neutralness that the city provides.
They used to do that with appraisals on properties, where the loan officers could pick their own appraiser.
Yep.
And
Because they knew.
that
it had
turned
to
out
come
really
in.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the next step after that is no inspections. And it's a tough bill.
Why don't we just let the developers collect the taxes directly?
Well, they,
I mean, why not?
So, but yeah, just cut the middleman out and we're done.
So those are the ones that are kind
Actually,
of.
why don't builders just run city government? It would be
they
great.
kinda are. What about the bill that will allow them access to, what's the fund that we have to
The
pay to?
P-TIF?
The P-TIF, what about
Has that
that?
one been
Well,
numbered?
they're trying.
Oh,
It hasn't, I don't know that it's come out yet, but yeah, they want to take that
Our
pool
tax-
investment money.
That's why it was set up, so that they can use it.
our money, it reminds me of Social Security. They take our money and then they well, we got it all sitting here, so we might as well lend it out to people at a lower interest. Well, can any resident go up there and say, I need a lower interest
Oh,
loan
no,
from
no,
you
because they're not
too?"
qualified. They don't know
Exactly,
what
so I mean, I just think it's taxpayer money, I don't understand why we are allowing that, right? And again, it goes back
There's
to.
a housing crisis.
But it goes back to the affordability crisis, they're creating an affordability crisis for current homeowners because the taxes that we have to pay to subsidize these programs,
But-
that's called socialism, that's called redistributing
No,
people's
Sherry,
money.
what you don't understand is that once they have access to this money, they can build all the infrastructure they need. So we will have the 30,000 home housing
Exactly.
No,
gap
won't be a shortage.
cleared
Everything will be
in
all,
in a 1 year, and
everything
it'll
will
all
be
be
all
perfect, and
better.
houses prices will come down so fast.
exactly, and it's the
It'll be
same, it's the
incredible.
same, it's the same, wait, it's the same one that they have with the water, right?
Magic.
What about that bill that they just dropped, what's the number for it?
118.
118, with the 118, now it's gonna give them grant money to meet the conservation standards, it's like, no, and then who's gonna pay for that? Well, current homeowners have to pay to make
So,
homes
well,
cheaper
let me get my
for new
7.5
homeowners,
foot
this is crazy.
factory up and running.
Okay, thank you, Todd.
That's it?
Appreciate it.
Your 7 foot leash.
And then we'll
No
pass
close
those
tonight,
along.
we don't have a close tonight, thank you everybody for being here Valentine's night.
Sorry.
Make it.
I'll just say,
Okay, Sherry just
in
made a motion
regards
to
to
adjourn.
that,
Second.
refer to my
All in
comments
favor?
in the
Aye.
agenda
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
of the legislature.
So there's this bill,